All right. How you doing, guys? Dr. Nathan Thompson here with Exemplify Health Center, your Wellness Way affiliate right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Happy Sunday evening, guys. If you guys are joining us right now, go ahead and say hello. Let me know where you guys are watching from. I always love to see from around the world where people are watching from. It gives me motivation to continue doing this. So go ahead and say hello, guys. Consequently, we are also streaming this video live to my Instagram page, Dr. Nathan Thompson. So if you don't follow that, go ahead and follow that on Instagram, because I am streaming this talk live on Instagram right over there. So I'm saying hello to my Instagram followers as well. We always want to give as much valuable content. The reason why I'm streaming this one on Instagram is because on that page on Instagram, I share a lot of exercise things and things like that. You might not know, people know me as a guy who reads labs, but I also have a passion for exercise, only because my life was changed by it in more ways than one. And so I share a lot of exercise things. I even, even prior to starting the Wellness Way, I was deep into exercise science, exercise like recovery, movement, and things like that. And I actually got one of the highest levels of certifications actually in CrossFit. So only about 1,000 in the whole world. Got it because I just wanted to understand everything, and I wanted to be the best at what I did. So it's constant and never-ending improvement in every single thing that I do. And I hope it's the same when it comes to learning about your health, but also applying things to your health. So for those of you who like exercise, okay, this one is going to be pretty fun, because I'm going to talk about exercise and recovery, and I'm going to talk about some common lab findings that even maybe your doctor does once a year, that is going to tell you to change some things and change them pretty quickly. All right. So let's talk about exercise and recovery. So one of the things is that, everybody says, especially I'll talk to you actually the CrossFit world right now, because in the CrossFit world, they talk about, hey, working out is important, but recovery is actually more important. And I think a lot of people say that, but they don't necessarily understand the science actually behind recovery and why recovery is so important, especially if you are doing high intensity, short duration, functional type exercise, which is really what I recommend for a lot of people. Now, some people actually tell them, hey, you need to take 2 to 3 months off from exercise because you've been overdoing it and you haven't been recovering. You're seeing some pretty bad things start to take place on the lab. And if you don't change that, then your body is going to fail. You're probably going to get very injured. I remember that actually telling that to a very high level CrossFitter, saying you really need to scale back according to some of your lab findings. And she said, nope, I can't. I got a competition coming up. And I said, I hope you hang on, because you're probably going to get injured. And lo and behold, at the event, performed terribly, got injured. And one of the biggest reasons why was because over-exercise and then under-recovered, which her tissues that she was tearing down every single day didn't have the ability to be able to recover. So let's talk about this. And in fact, I'm going to go over with you an interesting lab from someone who really liked CrossFit, who was doing it for a long time, was in the competition realm with CrossFit, but was absolutely just falling apart. So this was an individual. Let me give you a little background. This was an individual who basically high stress job, slept about 5 to 6 hours a week, or a night, which was not enough, was training 5 to 6 times a week. Some days were actually like 2 a days, so not just like one session, but like 2 sessions, usually involving strength. And, didn't eat enough, and just very high stress, And so when you look at these lab markers, like look at all of the things, like even on a medical test, how out of range they actually are. And so you see low lymphocyte percentage, high granulocytes, which is indicating like high inflammation and tissue damage, things like that. But very low lymphocytes, which means white blood cells, specifically things like B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes that are responsible for handling viral infections, cancer, tumor suppression, antibody response. Those were actually very low. You saw that creatinine was very high, and you guys probably will see this on your labs if you get them done, like a CMP every single year from your doctor. But when you see creatinine that starts to get high, in this particular case, what it means is there's a high amount of muscle damage, high amount of muscle breakdown, and it wasn't getting clear from the kidneys. On top of that, high amounts of potassium, which makes sense. If there's any kind of muscle destruction, cell destruction, those cells can actually release potassium into the blood, because most of your potassium, guys, is stored within the cells. It's not stored within the bloodstream. Then you got low globulin. So if you guys have seen these, grab your lab work. So low globulin, for example, globulins are actually the proteins that carry hormones. Okay, it's just one of the things. So basically, globulins are antibodies and they're protein carriers for all of your different hormones. And so if you're low, you can be very low in the ability to be able to transport hormones. Okay, so globulin, big thing. One of the biggest reasons why globulin can be low, and I see it low in a lot of people, is for a couple of reasons. Number one, you might have just chronically low stomach acid, which almost everybody does, which means it's the inability to be able to break down proteins. And remember, when you're seeing low lymphocytes, when you're seeing low globulin, when you might be seeing low albumin, these are really proteins. And so if you can't digest them, you can't break them down, you can't absorb them across the intestines as in the form of amino acids, you're going to chronically be low in globulin. But the other thing too, guys, is being low in globulin can also really just be that the liver is not doing very well, because this is where these protein carriers are manufactured, where they're made is within the liver. So cholesterol, you can see very high, actually LDL very high, which means there's a lot of damage taking place, probably due to inflammation, whether it be anywhere in the body, can cause a higher cholesterol just based on the inflammatory response. Because remember, cholesterol is secreted by the liver based on need. It's not making a mistake when cholesterol starts to elevate. And then finally, you see one that's really interesting, which is called reverse T3, which is the brakes basically on T3 production. So whenever someone is highly stressed, whenever someone is basically in starvation mode as well, the body says, let's put a brake on T3 and let's try to slow your thyroid down quite a bit. So it will take the active form of thyroxine, T3. It will then basically turn it into a mirror image and inactivate it so that you have less of this T3, so that those cells will respond by slowing down their metabolism. So we see a lot in people who chronically undereat, and yes, this person was chronically undereating because he was so busy. He was just eating on the run all the time. So when you look at this, the other thing too that I saw was that we measured what was known as CEA, carcinogenic embryonic antigen, which is basically a cancer marker. And when you have quickly growing cells, you will see that this marker will elevate. So we'll test it on people who've had cancer, but we'll also test it even on athletes too, because you want to see like, hey, what's going on? So people specifically who've had cancer, but specifically if they've had cancer, you want to be testing this every 6 months or up to a year, so that if you see that this starts to elevate, all right, you need to start changing some things. But if you see it continues to elevate, then you probably need to start looking further to see as if there's actually some kind of tumor or tumors that's growing within the body. So when you look at this right here, this was taken about 2 years ago or so. And so you could look at this, and I would look at this if I didn't know who this person was and say, yeah, this person is very overworked, probably undereating, probably not sleeping enough, and is, just on the surface of it, is getting pretty beat up. The other thing too is C-reactive protein was at about 2, which in someone who might be 40, 42 years of age, right around there, that's pretty elevated, and you don't want to see that continue to stay up for a long time. So when you look at this person is definitely headed towards having a very bad day, but also this person didn't feel very good as well. So very chronically tired, very sore, very stiff in the morning, would wake up in the morning and say, I can't believe that I have to work out again because I feel like I can't move. So a lot of lower back injuries, a lot of shoulder injuries, plantar fasciitis. So just it felt like just to him, everything was actually just falling apart. Now, full disclosure, guys, is who this is that it's me. It's me. All right. So it's actually me. So this is actually me a little bit before I had taken these tests. But you can see very low body fat percentage, working out all the time. Aesthetically, probably looked at my best. However, from a lab perspective, certainly not where it needed to be. So this is why, guys, I always say, and I'm going to talk to those people who are the chronic over-exercisers especially, is how you look on the outside does not determine how healthy you are on the inside. I see just as many people who have a low body fat percentage, who exercise all the time, that still can get cancer, for example, and mainly because is that there's another monster that you have to start addressing when you fall in love with exercise or when you start exercising quite a bit. Because I'm going to tell you guys something, is that if you think of exercise, particularly if you're doing high intensity, short duration exercise, I want you to think about it. It's causing tissue damage. So your muscles are actually breaking down, which is going to cause an inflammatory response. There's going to be oxidative damage that occurs because of that, and you're going to need more resources for your body to be able to heal from it. That makes sense. So here I was not sleeping enough, exercising too much, not recovering, and then shortly after that, it just felt like everything started to break down. And I'm going to show you actually why things started to break down, because I'm going to show you a really, really cool graph as far as why you do need sleep and the role between melatonin and cortisol that I actually talked about last week, last Monday. All right, so watch. This is why this is so important, guys. So I want you to think of cortisol. And most of the time we think cortisol is something that's really, really bad. And cortisol is not necessarily that bad, because cortisol is actually in the red, and it's what wakes you up in the morning. So cortisol should be the highest in the late morning to early afternoon. And then what you see is you see that it continues to taper off and should be gradually tapering off and really be at its lowest at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And that should actually prepare you to be able to get ready for bed. So cortisol is a stress hormone. It's what makes you, feel awake. And when people have chronically low levels of cortisol, they just feel sluggish, fatigued, and tired. In fact, I was just talking to a woman who's had autoimmunity for 20 years, and she's been on steroid, basically anti-inflammatories, and basically cortisone, which is a derivative of cortisol, and she's been on it for 20 years. And I said, well, let me guess, your joints feel okay when you're on it, but you're absolutely fatigued, and also your menstrual cycle is really messed up, isn't it? She's like, my gosh, how did you know? Because you're going to know the hormone response, what happens when people have chronically elevated cortisol levels, how it messes with the menstrual cycle, how it messes with energy levels, because cortisol is anti-inflammatory. And why it's not your bed, all right? So I want you to think of, most people think, they say, what is the best thing to take as far as recovery is concerned, especially for people who love to exercise. And for the longest time, I even thought that it was glutathione. So people say, glutathione, it's made in the liver, it's a universal antioxidant. But in reality, guys, the universal antioxidant in the body is a hormone that's known as melatonin, okay? So melatonin, here's cortisol, but what's interesting when you look at melatonin is that melatonin starts to peak at about 7 o'clock at night, and you can see that it peaks all the way up to about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you can see that it goes way down, okay? Now, most people think that melatonin is some kind of, weird hormone that just helps you to sleep, and yes, it does, but in reality, the true meaning that, or a reason why people have melatonin, or why you need melatonin, is that it's a hormone released by the pineal gland, and it is basically the universal antioxidant that gets into the cell and helps to repair the mitochondria. So when the mitochondria get damaged, you can kiss your health goodbye, particularly when you're talking about 75 trillion cells inside of your body. So melatonin is absolutely critical. So if melatonin is involved with healing and repair, guess what? Is that in order for you to be able to heal and repair at night, you need low cortisol levels and you need high melatonin levels. And that can only be achieved naturally by actually going to sleep. And when should you be going to sleep? You really should be going to sleep by 9 or 10 o'clock, because that window for that melatonin production really runs out at about 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is why when people work a night shift, or they're going to bed at 4 in the morning and they're sleeping until noon, they're like, I slept 8 hours, but I just don't feel good. I don't feel recovered. And that's exactly the reason why, because they're just over time, their bodies just start to get beat up because they're not repairing, recovering, and healing the way that they're supposed to. So guys, this is why, if you think about it, if you're exercising in here and you're creating muscle damage, you're creating tissue damage, you're putting yourself into fight or flight, I want you to think about it is that now you're going to need that healing to take place. So if you start skipping sleep, lo and behold, over time, you're going to see very poor tissue repair, and you're just going to start seeing that things will start to go sideways because you are overworked and that you are under recovered. So I know what a lot of you are going to think. You're going to think, oh my goodness, maybe I should be taking melatonin. Well, it's one of the things that you can do, and we will recommend it for people during certain times within their care. And I'll show you some lab markers here in just a second that are going to show you whether or not you need to really increase your melatonin and to increase your recovery, and to see if you have too much cortisol that's circulating throughout the body because you're just exercising too much. Because remember, exercise will raise that cortisol. This is why not a very good time to be working out is at 7, 8 o'clock at night, because you're forcing your body to then start to elevate your cortisol, which is then going to inhibit the release of melatonin. So this is why, guys, the best time to be working out is going to be when your melatonin levels are the lowest, but the cortisol levels are at its highest, so that you don't have to artificially try to stimulate it even more. And 9, 10 o'clock in the morning is probably the best time to be working out. So I, for one, when I started working out from way over here at night to about noon, I found that I was starting to recover a lot better, because I wasn't artificially elevating my cortisol at a time where cortisol should be down and melatonin should actually be up, okay? So let's go over a couple of lab markers that you should be looking at. We run these, not on everyone, but if someone's coming in and they're, a CrossFit athlete, because I, also own a gym with my wife, Exemplify Health Center, or not, CrossFit Exemplify. I'm getting way too exemplified here. CrossFit Exemplify. And sometimes when people come in, I will actually tell people who are members of our gym, hey, you know what? You need to take a month off and work on recovering just based on your lab markers, okay? So I know it hurts my business, but first and foremost, as a doctor, I always have to have the patient and their health in mind first. So let's go over a couple of lab markers, okay? Number one, BUN, blood urea nitrogen, okay? So your blood urea nitrogen will start to elevate, especially when you are not recovering very well, okay? So very low melatonin will cause an elevation of blood urea nitrogen. The other one is going to be creatinine, not creatine, it should be creatinine. Creatinine is basically released with any kind of muscle damage. A lot of times they'll look at this lab marker, especially if to confirm if someone's had a heart attack with muscle damage. But if you're working out, you're gonna get a lot of muscle damage as well. And in fact, sometimes we'll see this on a lab marker when we do what's known as a Dutch test, and see creatinine is elevated, and usually we're saying, hey, did you do a really hard workout before you took the test? And a lot of times it was, yeah, I really worked out really hard. So it's going to cause an elevation in creatinine. The other one too is going to be globulin. So check your globulins. So globulins a lot of times can mean you're not digesting your proteins very well. The other thing is that you may be having some issues with the liver, so that globulin gets low. It just means that you're going to have low proteins within the blood. Just like I showed you the lab work on myself with reverse T3, that reverse T3 elevates too. Could mean that you're not eating enough, you're way, way too stressed. But I've also seen reverse T3 be sky high in people who actually had cancer as well, had no idea that they had cancer, but that reverse T3 looked so off compared to everything else. We had to look further, and lo and behold, I've seen people actually, had to send them for more testing, and they had cancer. Homocysteine is another one. So, and you start getting some elevations of homocysteine, basically your arteries are going to get really, really inflamed. If those arteries get inflamed, high risk for heart attack, probably the number one marker of whether you're going to have a heart attack or not. When people start having elevations of homocysteine, one of the biggest things that they'll feel is they'll have a lot of what are known as fibromyalgia type symptoms. So they can have fatigue, they can have depression, they also can have just problems with just body aches, joint aches, no energy whatsoever. So if you know someone who's got fibromyalgia, just go ask them, how do you feel from day to day? And they will tell you, I hurt, I have no energy, I'm fatigued, I feel depressed, and that can be in relation to homocysteine. C-reactive protein can be elevated, so hopefully your doctors are measuring that as well. And then finally, looking at your cortisol and cortisone, okay? Cortisol and cortisone. This is so important, guys, because a lot of people think that they do, in fact, have some kind of, adrenal fatigue. And guys, if you're doing properly testing the adrenal glands, especially like on a Dutch test. I had a woman on Saturday I did a consult with, and she said, I'm so fatigued, help me get my energy back. Her cortisol levels and her adrenal glands were through the roof. I mean, her adrenal glands had no problems being able to make adrenal hormone, but one of her problems was she couldn't clear it from the liver because she had a fatty liver. So she had very low, what's known as free cortisol, but actually her total cortisol was through the roof. And a lot of it was getting shunted into what is known as cortisone, which is very anti-inflammatory. So if someone is very inflamed, they'll be making cortisol, but a lot of it will get shunted in the kidneys, in the liver, in the GI system into what is known as cortisone. You guys know this. If you guys ever look at hydrocortisone or someone getting a cortisone injection, that will actually raise up those cortisol levels, which is why it messes with the pituitary gland and the thyroid and everything else so badly. So you can measure the cortisol and the cortisone, and when you look at those two, a lot of times when people are suffering from fatigue, you can see what's going on at the adrenals, and are they more mentally stressed, or are they really, really inflamed? What's the reason why they might not have a whole heck of a lot of energy, okay? So let me give you a couple of tips, guys, and remember, if you found this interesting, if you enjoy this content, just always please make sure to share. It's the only thing that I ask you to do. But let's give you some tips on what you can do to recover better. So the first thing that I would tell you is work on trying to get your melatonin levels up naturally. So number one, sleep. So how much did you get sleep? A lot of it, the more you're training, the more you're exercising, the more sleep that you should be getting. So I would say, if you would just say clear across the board, men, you need to be getting 7 hours of sleep. Most of that sleep, guys, needs to be from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. That's why the earlier you go to bed, the better it is for your recovery and for your melatonin levels. Another thing to increase your melatonin levels is called far infrared sauna. We actually have it in our office right over there. And so when we are putting people through different things, protocol, I hate to say protocols, but things like detox, for example, whether it be from mold or whether it be heavy metals or whether it be just for fatty liver or things like that, we will recommend that they go through or do infrared sauna like 7, 8, 9 times over 30 days, because that infrared sauna actually helps to increase your melatonin. The other thing too, for those people who are working out, is make sure that you're timing your protein at the right time. I can't stress this enough, but guys, the whole idea behind having a protein shake immediately after you work out, like 30 minutes or an hour, because that protein needs to get into your body so that the muscles can be fed, is probably one of the worst things that you can do, guys, because when you work out and you put yourself into what is known as fight or flight, your stomach acid production goes way down. So the way your bowels don't move, you don't process food, stomach acid production goes way down. So you need, guys, stomach acid to be able to break down your proteins and to also sterilize your food. And so if you are pounding protein after doing exercise, particularly high intensity exercise or anything that's putting you in fight or flight or anything that's stimulating cortisol, that putting that protein in can cause a lot of gastrointestinal issues, leading to a lot of food allergies, for example. So the other thing is stomach acid. So one of the things that you can counteract that, especially if you're stressed or if you're eating on the run, or if you just got done with a workout, is actually start taking apple cider vinegar, or if you need something stronger like betaine hydrochloric acid. So you put it in, give your body the stomach acid that it needs in order to break down those amino acids. Here's another thing for all the ladies, especially if you're from 12, 13, 14 years of age, all the way up to 48, 49, 50, 51, 52 years of age, is really working on, as a long-term plan, training around your menstrual cycle, okay? Dr. Nate, what do you mean by that? Well, I will tell you that there really is only about 2 weeks, ideally, out of your month, out of the 28 days, that you should be training hard. And we're talking about hard weightlifting. We're talking about high intensity exercise like CrossFit. That ideally you only have about 2 weeks in which you should be doing any kind of high intensity, functional, short duration exercise. And those 2 weeks that you can do it would be week 2 and week 4. But week 1, when you're menstruating, you are literally giving birth to tissue, okay? And so you need to take it easy during that time because you need to supply the oxygen and the blood supply to the uterus to be able to contract and squeeze, and you shouldn't be shunting it all the time into the extremities. So during week 1, you really should be focused on doing things that are relaxing. Yes, you can walk. Yes, you can do more bodybuilding type activities, but you shouldn't be doing heavy Olympic lifting. You shouldn't be doing real high intensity exercise during that time. Because one of the things is if you don't shed the lining of the uterus, then what happens is that you can then start building another lining over the lining that should have been released. And if that continues to happen, that's a perfect recipe for things like endometriosis, okay? Now, week 3, you can do whatever, or week 3, I would say, is when you also want to take it easy, because this is actually where your progesterone needs to be the highest. And the number one cause of someone having chronically low progesterone is going to be due to the cortisol steal, as we call it. So if you go and you look up how these hormones are metabolized or how they're produced, they all come from cholesterol, and then which then pregnenolone is manufactured, and it can go into either pregnenolone or then it can go into cortisol, and so the body has a choice. So if you're highly stressed, mentally stressed, or stressed because of excessive exercise, the body says, I make a choice, fertility or the bear. Which one do I want to run away from? And remember, the body will always choose running away from the bear as quickly as possible. That's always going to take priority over fertility or anything like that. Now, what about supplementation? Yep, supplementation can definitely help. So there's certain things that you can do to help with recovery or to help with melatonin levels. Yes, you can take exogenous melatonin. We recommend about 3 grams of it just to help increase melatonin levels, especially if you see those on the labs. Melatonin, take it at night when you're going to be recovering the most. Some people, we've had them take 6 milligrams, some people even 9 milligrams. We prefer not to do that because there's other ways that you can do it, like just trying to sleep more. But other supplements can actually help to raise melatonin as well and help with tissue recovery. One of them that I absolutely love is called Shisandra, which can help stimulate melatonin release. And then other things like blocking the stress response, like some sedatives like California poppy or kava, that can also help too, lowering that stress response, because when that cortisol level goes up, tissue healing and repair is not going to be do very well. So yes, you can take some supplements. There's other things that you can do to increase melatonin and also glutathione production, like coffee enemas, things like that. But I would say rather than run to trying to take things, focus first on your sleep, making sure that you're getting enough sleep. Guys, 7 to 8 hours. Ladies, 8 to 9 at least, and really should be going to bed at 9:30 and 10 o'clock to make sure that you're getting that melatonin push during that time, and you should be sleeping. So rather than run to getting a supplement, focus on your sleep. Add in some infrared sauna. You can also do things like grounding, which is just going outside for a walk in the sun barefoot. That will actually release infrared radiation from the ground to the feet, which can help. Or guys, just maybe take a week off and go to the beach and just lay on the beach and soak up the sun. This is why so many people feel so good when they're out in the sun, and yet we're told in mainstream healthcare that the sun is bad, that the sun is damaging, and that you should try to avoid the sun as much as possible. And guys, I don't know, God wouldn't give us the sun if it was there to hurt us. So guys, give this a try this out, and again, we'll see how this goes going live on Sunday. And the only reason is because, man, it's otherwise I'm not getting out of the office until about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So it makes for a super long day. So let me know, guys, what you think. And if you enjoyed this, please share this video. Please comment again where you're watching from. I always appreciate to see where you guys are watching from. And guys, I hope you guys enjoy your Sunday night. Be well. I hope you have a great week. I know I will have a great week. And we will talk to you guys very soon.